So, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do another review of a RPG system. This time it's Modern Age by Green Ronin. So it's the modern day version of the adventure game engine. The adventure game engine or age system is something that Green Ronin have been running for a long time. We have the Dragon Age, of course, role-playing game, and then we also have the uh, Fantasy Age, and there's also Titan's Grave, which is also based off of this system. And Modern Age is the one that you would run for the modern day and modern day scenarios. The book that I have dates back from 2018, so it is a fairly new release, so 5 years old at this stage. And first of all, as is par for the course with Green Ronin, a couple of things to get out of the way. This is an Insta buy and recommendation if you are interested in modern age role playing. It's a one-stop shop for all your modern day role-playing needs. You just need to buy this particular book. It's for players and GMs alike. So the players would read the first part and the GM would read both parts of the book. You don't really need anything else. And as I said in my curbing the crunch video, I want the simple life. And if I want to run a system or a story at this stage and not use one of these staples that I have used in the past, I want to go for simple systems where I only need one, max two books, because I simply don't want to spend too much time or invest too much money in simply telling a story and trying to get the mechanics right. Since this is an age system, you again have 3d6s that you roll. A roll has a target number which people have to meet or exceed. And you do this by rolling 3d6 and then adding your ability and a focus if you've got it, and then hopefully meeting or exceeding the target number. If you happen to roll doubles on a successful roll, you can invoke stunt points from your stunt die. So in order to play this smoothly, it's recommended that you have 3d6s, two of which have the same color and one is an off-color die, and that would be your stunt die. So if you've played Dragon Age, if you've played Fantasy Age, then you're very familiar with this particular rule. When we look at the actual makeup of the actual gameplay, the first thing that is pointed out and that you will notice is this is a classless game. So there are no classes. Of course, you know, in a fantasy setting, you'd have the rogue, maybe a mage, maybe a fighter, something like that. In modern games, like for example, Call of Cthulhu, you do have something like roles or classes, but they are not really relevant as much. They just basically give you specifics, in particular abilities, so you can get more scores in those. But if you just want to say build a character, make it your own, here are 600 points, just spend them, you could just arrive at the same result. So instead of having classes, the way the game works when you do character creation, and again, they offer you the completely random version, which is the same as for Fantasy Age. So you get a lot of different tables to roll on, your background, your social class, etc. And then you just have to make do with whatever you roll. This is not my way of doing it. I really do not like to randomize that much. I don't mind randomizing the basic abilities, so basically rolling a 3d6 and then taking whatever I get. But I personally want to have a certain character concept and then say, okay, I want to play an investigative, or I want to play a fighting person, or I want to play a socialite, and then basically roll the 3d6s 9 times because you've got 9 abilities, and then assign the results in a way that makes sense. With regard to the backgrounds, you have 4, kind of like the class system you have, and this is social class, you've got the outsider, lower, middle, and upper class, and each of these again has some sub classes that you can roll on, or you can also just ask your players to choose from them. And again, these levels, classes, whatever you want to call them, come with particular specialties, abilities that you get. So for example, if you are middle class and you are an academic, you get +1. You can roll on a table a 3d6 roll or 2d6 roll, I beg your pardon. And then you can either get +1 in communication, or the focus on intelligence research, or focus intelligence history, or +2 resources, +1 perception, +1 willpower, things like that. Again, I would not randomize this, because I would say to my players, okay, you cannot choose upper class. I would just leave this out. You can take outsider, lower, middle, and then take a look at what you can be there, and then take a look at what sub classes there are. Let's just call them classes, and then you can choose your focuses and abilities based on this. And then there is also the resources, if you like, it's not an ability, it's a stat, which I really like. It's about how much buying power do you have. And those of you who have played World of Darkness, Vampire, there is also the resources stat, and it's terrible. It's really badly implemented. There's a constant discussion what this actually means. Here they've done it differently. It is a stat, and you can roll on a table if you want to buy something, and something that you want to buy has a target number. And if you manage to get to that target number, you have bought it. If your base stat, as it were, is a lot larger than the price of whatever it is that you want to buy, you get it. You don't have to roll. It's kind of like an automatic buy, because it is deemed that you have enough resources to buy it. But if you want to buy something that's super expensive, your resources, and you manage to buy it, your resources will be depleted. If you try to roll and fail, then your resources do not get depleted, but you've also not bought the item. I think this is a really great way of implementing resources, and it makes perfect sense, because it makes buying possible. It makes resource management easy. And it's a lot less arbitrary than the World of Darkness system in Vampire, where I simply say, okay, I've got 3 points in resources, so I have like this, and this. And basically then when I want to buy something, okay, do I deplete my resources? How does this work? I remember in our first Vampire game, that was a constant struggle. And this time round, we just completely forwent it. You know, it's more like, yeah, well, you have resources and that's it. Again, maybe a little less realistic than I would have liked it to be. In the first game, it was way too complex, and I always felt that we weren't getting as much as we should have been getting. And now I'm like, you know, it doesn't play a role. So I was very interested in this mechanic, and I have to say it's a great one, and I really like it. This being a character-driven game, a lot of the time, this is all about character drive. They've also got the relationship mechanic. So basically, you get slots in relationship, and you can build relationships with people. It can be an NPC, it can be a PC, but of course, if it's a PC, then a relationship can be anything. It can also be an kind of like a competitive relationship, like, okay, so how many orcs did you slay, Legolas? That's also a relationship. Or it can be an adversarial relationship, you know, like I'm gonna kill you, you know. And basically, this relationship can have different intensity levels, and those relationships can be used to influence, for example, for the GM to influence the story by bringing in those relationships and turning them into hooks, or also in order to invoke certain mechanics, or basically you having to follow certain urges that stem from those relationships. You know, if your arch nemesis is over there and in easy reach, do you actually then just follow on and through with your, I don't know, the task that you're performing, or do you actually drop everything and just go after them? Which you could also check with a morale check. You know, do you actually manage to steer your course when faced with a relationship dilemma. So I really like that. It's almost a little bit like I mean, lots of things have been said about the alignment system that exist in certain role-playing games, and they are very difficult, especially since, you know, what is good, what is evil, what is lawful good, what is lawful evil. Of course, there are explanations, but who actually uses them? Most people I've seen, and I've played so much D&D, you have an alignment, but it's actually never really invoked. It's never really used. It's just there. Um, but I think this whole relationship thing, while it's not alignment per se, you're neither good nor evil, but it basically portrays or describes how you relate to certain things in your world. Um, and if you say, I'm a vengeful person, and all I want to do is I want to get rid of my nemesis, even if this means letting down my friends because this outweighs every other consideration, one could consider you quite evil. Okay, there's like a couple of people who have been um, run over by a bus and who are in dire need of help, but the bus driver was your arch nemesis. They're now fleeing on foot, so you just decide to pursue them instead of helping the injured. One could consider this quite evil behavior, but it kind of makes sense for you as a person, but does that make you evil? No. And then there's another thing in talking about drive. They have the drive mechanic. Now, the drive did remind me a little bit of a mechanic that I remember from Vampire, but also from Changeling, where everybody has kind of like two, I don't know, aspects, concepts, whatever they call them. It eludes me at the moment, which basically describe certain aspects of your character. And the drive does that as well. And there are a couple of drives listed here, and I believe that you can probably build your own as well. But each drive has a positive and a negative. The drive is what makes you say yes to something, what makes you pursue something. It can be used also to tap into by the GM as a hook. So, for example, one of the drives in the book is builder. And I'm going to read this. And for those of you who want to read with me, it's page 23. You want to create something lasting. It might be an institution, an organization, a movement, a community, or something else. Unlike the achiever, that's a different drive, who is all about the accomplishment, you're all about the end product, and you're willing to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to get there. Now, that's the to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to get there. To do whatever it takes. That could also mean shady business, maybe accepting a bribe, maybe giving bribes, although bribing people is definitely an evil thing to do if we're back to the dichotomy of good and evil. But every drive also has a downfall. So in this case, your quality is organization, being able to figure out how to structure things so they work. However, your downfall is stubbornness, becoming so caught up in structure that you lose flexibility. That's actually me in some cases. So this would also mean that I, as the GM, can use this to quote from the cipher system as a GM intrusion. You know, for example, to increase the difficulty of a check because you are so inflexible, you're so focused on this that maybe looking left or right doesn't work. So when you're really focusing on it, you may forget about the world. That may mean, you know, not making a perception check or having to spend more on a perception check, or it's more difficult, but also maybe losing sight of the bigger picture. So maybe things go unnoticed, you know. And this is really, really interesting, and I really love it because it is so clear. Because I remember in Changeling, when you spend glamour, it's like spending willpower in Vampire. You have to get it back somehow, and it always says, you know, you have to indulge your your dark side, as it were, you know. But it's never made clear how this works, and it's always very. There is one thing that I don't like about rules, and that is when they're vague. I can deal with make up your own rules, but when they say, okay, this is a mechanic, and then the mechanic stays completely vague, I really don't like it because it doesn't make sense. If you have a rule, if you have a mechanic, it has to be crystal clear as to how it works, or leave it out. Here, it is very clear. And not only can you use these drives in order to do some storytelling, but you can also use it for conviction. And conviction is a point system. So you get, it's an optional system. You get 3 points of conviction at level 1. So that's a little bit like willpower in Vampire, or maybe even glamour. And you can use it for very specific things. So for example, you can spend a conviction point to gain the benefit of a defend action +2 to your defense without expending an action to do so. So that's very interesting in combat. Or you can recover health more easily. And you regain conviction by doing something in accordance with the different sides of their drive, either the downfall side or the quality side. So that's a really interesting way of using the drive as well, you know. So to me, I'm really amazed at how well this is designed, because that's a downfall of World of Darkness. They just have these different mechanics and they don't gel at all. But here it is so clearly and easily explained. So basically, character creation, I haven't tried it out myself, but just reading through it and comparing it to Fantasy Age is probably going to be done in less than half an hour. Even when you do not just roll on tables, if you just take the roll on a table and then take whatever you get and live with it, it's probably even more quick to do. But I would say you probably, if you're an experienced player, it'll take you 30 minutes. Now, of course, advancement is also described. You can gain levels through experience points, or you use a milestone system. This is something that we're all familiar with. And then, of course, we have something that is different. And I can't remember that this was ever mentioned in the Fantasy Age system, and I don't think it is. But there are 3 different game modes. Gritty, which I really like the name of. Pulpy and cinematic. Now, pulpy, when I first read it, I was like, oh my God, is this Call of Cthulhu pulp? No, Call of Cthulhu pulp is actually more Call of Cthulhu cinematic. Now, gritty actually means you are human, completely human. You are like everybody else. You know more because obviously you have been exposed to the grand scheme of things. So whatever your campaign is about, your players have been exposed to it, but you are human. So you have normal health, you don't do any special recovery, anything like that. In pulpy, you are a little bit stronger, a little bit less squishy. And in cinematic, you are basically, I don't know, Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones. Nothing ever assails you. You are fine. And you always come out the victor. So for example, when you play in gritty mode, after level 1, there is no improvement to your health. In pulpy mode, you get 1 plus constitution, which is minimum 1 per level after first. And in cinematic, you get 1d6 plus constitution per level after first level until level 10. And 1 plus constitution, minimum 1 per level after level 10. So that's a huge difference. And then, of course, there are also other changes. So, for example, toughness and defense advancement. In gritty mode, there isn't any change. In pulpy, there is some change. In cinematic, there is palpable change. Resources, for example, in gritty mode, it's only the GM that awards resources, and in pulpy you replenish 1 lost resource point each level and GM awards, and in cinematic you get +1 resources per level beyond level 1 and GM awards. However, they also state that you can mix these. So for example, that I can say with regard to health we play pulpy, with regard to resources we play gritty. the book then goes on to describe how the mechanics work with regard to tests. So it's a 3d6 plus ability plus focus if applicable. It goes into opposed tests. So if you, for example, have somebody that you need to fight against. It also goes into how to work group tests. So there are those tests where each person can, or which basically you can perform with someone else together at no so there is no problem there. Let's say you need to lift something and you or you want to drag something and everybody takes a hold of the rope and you drag together. That is different from a fine-tuning test where one person performs the main task and the other person is kind of helping. So if you basically do the group test, everybody rolls and everybody who is successful, so meets the TN or exceeds it, contributes. So you have the actual result plus the stunt dice for everybody else who has basically contributed and you add them together. If it's fine tuning, then it's just the highest stunt die, if I remember. I'm just looking this up at the moment, but I can't actually find it because the one thing I will say about this book doesn't have an index. Oh, it does actually. I didn't see it because the 2 pages were together. So basically the different types of tests are force multiplier and fine tuning. If cooperation is a force multiplier, each participant in the test rolls. Note the highest result and add the stunt die from every other participant to get it to the final test result. When this is the case and you expect characters to cooperate, you should set a higher TN than you would for a task one character could complete. If cooperation fine-tunes the result, each participant rolls. Use the highest result from among all participants, but when it comes to measuring the quality of the test, use the highest stunt die result from among all rolls. So you don't add them together in this case. So let's say we have 5 people participating and we have 3 people who pass the test. Then we take the highest test result. Let's say they rolled a 15. And then we look at the stunt die, at the highest stunt die out of the 3, and then say, okay, if this is a 1, it was barely. If it's a 6, it was a very good success. Then the book goes on to describe adversaries, of course, because this is also a book that addresses the DM. It gives you the stats, and the stats also are different depending on if you're playing in gritty, pulpy, or cinematic mode. It also puts in social adversaries because the idea is also, and they're very clear about this, not all of the conflict that your players will encounter will be armed conflict. There is also going to be social combat. So they've got different types of adversaries. So there's the, for example, the brainwashed killer, the cat burglar, but also the con artist or the fixer or the cult leader or the corrupt power broker. Then there is also information about how to award rewards and what kind of rewards there could be. For example, there could be honorifics, you could be made a member of a society or some kind of group. And of course, there are monetary rewards. There's also a chapter on how to deal with relationships, how to use the relationship intensity. Then, of course, there is also information on basically how to run a game. Generally speaking, how to handle PCs, how to handle NPCs, what kind of problems could arise from conflict within the group amongst the players or amongst the characters. And then there's also a special chapter devoted to powers. Now, in modern age, it is assumed that everyone plays a human being. There are no other races in the base rulebook. Now, there are at least 2 scenario campaign setting books, whatever you want to call them, for modern. One is Infinity and, Threefold. and the other one is called Lazarus. Now, I'm not sure if there are additional maybe races in these books, because I'm waiting for a threefold to hit my shelf. At the moment, it's out of stock, so I'm waiting for it to be restocked. But your players will be playing humans with all that entails. And they have abilities, so you can be a martial artist, you can be a soldier, you can be a fighter, you can be an investigator, you can be a private eye, you can be a police person, you can be an academic. But what you know and what you can do are all things that normal people can learn. It's not like you are special with regard to abilities that no one else has. So you're not a magician. You do not talk to the gods and get information from them or help or whatever. However, there are powers that you as the DM can bring into the game. And this is completely optional. It's also left up to you how you want to introduce them. If you want to introduce all of them or just some of them. And they are essentially arcana. And you can also have power focuses. There are ways in which you can spend points when you use a power. And there are also power stunts. You can also introduce things like powers and encumbrance, for example, that you cannot use an arcane power when you wear armor or something like that. I mean, this is something that we know from other games, you know, that mages cannot wear armor. You can also and you gain power points that you can use in order to spend and then use your powers. You can also say, okay, you get unlimited power points or you reduce the gain. You can also work with power fatigue. So basically, you don't use power points at all, but you just basically try to use your power. And then you have to see if you succeed against the TN of 9 plus 1/2 powers listed cost rounded down. And then if the fatigue test fails, you then gain levels of fatigue, which have different results then and effects. And this is what I really like, because again, you have so many different ways in which you can use this, but they are so simple. Each one of them is simple, it's well explained, and it works. So whatever your play style, if you say, okay, I want to use PowerPoints, and then people will just have to keep track of them. And if they run out of PowerPoints, then we have to think about how you regain them. There are also different options. Or that you say, okay, well, I don't really care about this. I just assume that my guys are so powerful that they can make those rolls. But, you know, they may actually overexert themselves. So we use the fatigue rules. And all of this is then rounded off with a question on what kind of a setting do you want to play in? What kind of a campaign do you want to run? Is it urban fantasy? Is it alternate history? Is it the League of Exceptional People? Do you want to run heists? Is it a procedural? Is it post-apocalyptic? So now this is condensed into 5 or 6 pages, and they just give you a brief overview of all of these different genres, as it were. To give you an idea, and they also provide you information on what other resources you could look at. Urban fantasy, for example, would be Bright. Never heard of this. Shadowhunters, never heard of this. The Harry Potter series, I have heard of this. The Dresden Files, I hate. American Gods, I've at least heard of. But it gives you an insight into what kind of resources you can tap into in order to build your campaign. Then they also tell you, well, it's modern age, but you could also have different eras. So worlds old and new, that would be 16 to 1820. And then it tells you if this framework works for cinematic, pulpy, or gritty or maybe all of them. So, for example, the West would work for all three, so 1840 to 1900, but Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, 1770 to 1820 would only work, or they would recommend to play it in pulpy mode. Folk horror like The Blood, On Satan's Claw, Witchfinder General, The Crucible, The Witch, they would say would work gritty, and I could completely get why. You can also have steampunk. You could have totally the Cold War or noir, 1930 to 1939, so that's gritty and pulpy. And you could also go into the future, 5 minutes from now, evolution. And they also really tell you how to play by then rounding the whole book off with a little adventure, the speculative venture. And it's set in a nondescript city, and you basically get a couple of pages of story, a couple of adversaries, and you can play with your group a little intro. And of course, you also have play aids in the book that you can copy, the modern age um, character sheet, but you can also get them on free Ronin. So I said at the very beginning, this is an insta buy if you want to play modern role-playing games. The setting is super flexible. You can play whatever you like. You can even play whenever you like if you want non-fantasy. It's only the one book. There are supplements, but they are not necessarily necessary to play. You don't need to buy them even to run the game. The quality of the book is very good. The writing, I would like to point out, Green Ronin write excellently. I don't know who their chief editor is, but whoever it is does a brilliant job. And this is 2023, but unfortunately, we still need to discuss this. And that's always the topic of representation and inclusivity. And I would like to point out that none of the Green Ronin books that I've read so far has not been not inclusive, has not been not trying to represent a large variety of people playing the game, engaging with the hobby. You have female GMs in the examples, you have male GMs, you have female players, you have male players, you have, you don't know this because you can't see the art, but you have diverse artwork, so you have representation there. And yes, I think it is important because we do want people to feel at home in the hobby. You do want people to enjoy the hobby, and if you don't find yourself represented, and I'm talking about the Scully factor here, people, you will not find yourself easily at home because you simply don't feel accepted. And Green Ronin don't make a big deal about it. They don't go out on the roofs and shout, "We are inclusive, we show representation." They just do it. So modern age basic rulebook, Green Ronin, published date 2018. It should be available as hardback. If it's not available at the moment, you can always get the PDF through greenronin.com or through Drive through RPG. It's a great recommendation. I really love it. I am actually planning on using it. I have an idea for a duet session where I want to showcase, first of all, the character creation, but then also play a couple of sessions with two heroes. And yeah, keep gaming. Enjoy. Bye.